Welcome to IT Nation Wise Up, the podcast that skips the sales pitch and gives you real, valuable, actionable insights to take back to your business. I'm Matt Topper here, as always, with Vicky Bruns, and we have a very special, exciting guest today, Carrie Green, the SVP of Operations for Altech. So, Carrie, thank you very much for coming on the show. And as
Yay,
we get
Carrie!
going, just give us and anyone listening the quick bio of who you are and what you do.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me. First off, I'm Carrie Green with Altech. We're an MSP in Canada, so just outside of Edmonton. Go Oilers! But I've been in the MSP space for about 10 years, about 25 years in the industry, but 10 specifically with the MSP. Started off as support technician, fingers to keyboards, putting those fires out day in, day out, learning the challenges, learning the excitement, and drinking through that fire hose of something new every single day, right? Worked my way from support tech all the way through to where I am now as the SVP of Operations. So my role now really is helping to steer the ship and making sure that we're moving in that forward momentum and motion by creating those processes and procedures within the organization to really streamline and create those efficiencies with our customers, both internally and externally.
Carrie, I'm really curious to hear what did you do before you got into the MSP world?
I did about 10 years with our provincial government. So I did a lot of the infrastructure back then. I did lots of backups, switch configurations, all that stuff that you would not want to put me in
Whoa,
front of now.
that is so
Yeah.
Nice.
cool.
Yeah. Very different from where I am now. But you know what? You learn from everything.
Yeah. And by the
Yeah.
way, Carrie, I've known you or I've known of you for a few years. And I know
Mhm.
we recently connected. I think it was at the CompTIA planning meeting last
Last year, I
year.
think.
Yeah. But ever since I've known you, you've had this like you've had purple hair. And I just have to say, if you're not watching the YouTube video of this, make sure to go to IT Nation. But Carrie has always been authentically herself, and I love that about you, Carrie. So yeah, and also great tie into a panel that you did recently about being your authentic self.
Truth. Oh, that was probably one of the funnest panels, out there of just who you are. I'm that person who, believe it or not, I like to be at the back of the room, be the quiet one. But again, I have purple hair. You can't really blend into the walls, right?
In fact, I'm sure that I have seen you now at events now that Vicky pointed out the purple hair. There's only a few in the
That's
space.
true. That's true.
So
Uh,
outside of being in charge of the operations at Alltech, there's also other stuff that you do for the MSP community. Can you give us kind of a high level overview of those other activities?
For sure. Depends on which hat I'm wearing on which day, right? But co-founder of Can IT Con, so a Canadian MSP event that we created. It's on year two. So that's, a great way to bring the community together and share, collaborate, and learn. And then also do a lot of work with CompTIA and the trade association. Sit on the North American Executive Council as well as chair the MSP interest group. Yeah.
so we were talking about something beforehand before I hit record because apparently I'm not good at this IT stuff. That I thought would be worth bringing up again. And we started talking about, from an operations perspective, having staff or them knowing when to, the phrase I like to use is like crumple up the policy and just do something off script. How do you know how much leeway to give your staff in that kind of thing? Like, obviously, you can't hold them rigid 100%, but how much rope do you give them and how do you help them make that decision?
Just enough not to hang themselves. No, like, in all seriousness, it's a tricky balance, like, to be completely honest. You have to kind of do a little bit of a dance, I think, and, really work with them and coach, your staff, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to be able to trust our staff, right? And we can create the
Yeah.
frameworks and put those policies, procedures, and all of that kind of stuff in place, but there has to be a human element to that too, right? It can't just be, well, here's your script, here's your guidebook, and that's all you can do. In order, I was saying before the show, right? There's a box, and we create this box, this framework, and we want to put everybody inside that. But you don't have that personal touch when you do that. So trying to find that way to round and soften those edges and, empower our staff to make those decisions. If we're, disarming somebody, or if we're, listen to what your customers are saying. Are they having a rough day? How can we, take that and make that, um, turn that around, or be human with them, right? So sometimes we do have to just, okay, here's the process or procedure. I'm going to just put that to the side, and let's talk about you, and let's fix your problem. Let's throw a band-aid on that for right now. But that doesn't negate that, we still need the approvals, or we still need to do this. We've done this for now, but we can come back and, massage that, afterwards too sometimes.
So it's like giving context, right? And then being able to work with you're meeting the employee where they're at.
The employee or the customer, whoever you're dealing with that time, right? Um, we're all human at the end of the day, and there's no amount of, well, process and procedure will make your business, very efficient, without having that personal touch or that human element, that softness with your customers. They're not going to be your customers for long. They don't want to just be a number, just
Mm.
like your employees don't want to just be a number, right? How you treat them is, I think, is really pivotal. And that we're all, at the end of the day, we all crave that human connection, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can
they want
I
to feel like they have their IT person, not their
Hmm.
their robot who's just implementing the same thing everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
We're one of those MSPs that we pick up the phone. People can still call us. We can, our technicians, they call before they send that email, right? They'll follow up with a summary email after, but, you know, there's a voice on the end of the phone, because sometimes you don't know if somebody just having a bad day, or how often have you misread context in a email or in a text message? All the time, right?
Mhm.
Never.
Well, also, you don't know what type of day your client or that employee is
Mhm.
having either. So yeah.
Yeah. That's where
I said
Copilot's kind of cool, right? Because you can have it
Yeah.
write your email, or you write your email and you're like, okay, can you change this tone?
I
Right.
love it. It's such a great tool. Yeah.
Okay, I
Mhm.
know I went off topic, Vicky, and you wanted to talk about a different topic
No,
for this episode, but that was such a good conversation
it
pre-show. We have
was.
to get it in.
So being a mom, and Carrie, I know you're a mom too. I was just thinking in the back of my mind when you and Matt were talking about, being like a little soft around the edges when it comes to processes. I'm dealing with my son like not listening to the word no recently with his teachers and with me. And so I'm like, all right, Vicky, you just have to be like softer around the edges, give him context, meet him where he's at. So it's just so funny how we talk about, hey, we're doing this. I'm telling you to do this. I'm telling you to brush your teeth for a reason,
Mhm.
because I don't want you to get cavities, because too much sugar is not good for you. Right. So it's like the context that really helps the conversation. Right. And for
Yeah.
people to understand like why that process is in place.
Well, I think what you just said is a really great point, is meet them where they're at, right? And we actually just had this discussion yesterday or this morning actually, within our organization, right? It's, you know, some people call in and they email in with their ticket, and they want to be texted back, or they want to be emailed back, or they want to be called back, but not everybody's the same. So how do you meet them where they're at, right? It's the same as with your kids. Okay, well, if I'm not getting to them this way, I got to find a different way to get that. So really, like, learning that inner workings, and I think that really applies to the business world too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the processes and the skills that you've learned working in and the MSP that you're at has really helped to tie into a recent asset that was created by the North America Regional Group and the MSP Interest Group. So can you
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about that, Carrie?
Yeah, so we recently, I guess probably about 18 months ago, and released it last year, was the MSP Guidebook. So what that really is a framework for MSPs to dive into, like, looking at cultivating that culture of process efficiency, right? Everything that we've kind of been talking about. But it's a super simple read. It's 4 chapters. It was created by members, for members. I think there were about 36 people that worked on it.
Wow.
But it's taking the experiences of all those people and putting it into a really easy framework, right? So, talking about your ideal customer profile. Who are they? What do they look like? And everybody's kind of looks different, right? Are we looking
Mhm.
specifically at industries? Are we looking at just the budget? Like, I have to, pay the bills. So what am I looking for to make? Or am I looking at just compliances? Am I looking at business sizes, right? Depends on really what you're kind of looking for. We talk about analyzing competitors and leveraging superpowers. We all have those superpowers. And I think sometimes we forget about them, right? We're like, well, I can't do that, so I'm not gonna. Well, what are my superpowers? What am I really good at? And that's a question I love to ask when I'm talking to people. What's your superpower? Because it tells you so much about that person, and just how you can leverage some of those relationships, within the industry even, or, talking to different people. And, oh, I know this person, they can come and they can chat about this, right? So, we talk about being able to leverage that both with your employees as well as with your ideal customers. Then we talk about maximizing those processes, or making sure that our QBRs are in alignment. You're having those conversations, right? And throughout the whole guidebook, there's templates in there. There's the questions to ask. So it's not just for somebody new starting out. The guidebook really is a tool for anybody at any size, because you can adapt it to where you're at to take it to that next level. So it's built to help you scale your MSP to grow to the next level, right? When we took a look from the MSP interest group, we're like, what do people want? And everybody's at a different place. So again, it goes back to meeting you where you're at. And let's look at where we are and where we want to go. Some people are content where they are, and that's totally great. That's perfect. But if you want to get to that next level, well, what do I do? It can be sometimes overwhelming, right? The MSP is like, the whole channel is just so fast moving, right? The only thing consistent is change, right?
Mhm.
So how do we take that step back? So this framework is really trying to take that step back and creating something for, the members to be able to go and look at and walk through, to take them to that next step, right? It talks about the customer success roadmap. What does that look like? And that's different for everybody. But again, it's just a framework just to get you thinking, asking those questions. Be curious. It's my favorite phrase lately is
Be
be
curious.
curious. Yeah.
Always curious.
So would it be accurate to say that this is, across the spectrum of frameworks, this is not really prescriptive in that you have to have your QBR set up like this, or your ICP has to be this? It's that you have to think about what your ICP is, or this
Mhm.
is, think about what your uniques are, right? As opposed to go do these 75 things and you're good to go. It's kind of a more
Yeah,
Like a
reminder of
it's
prompt.
things
not
to think
telling
about.
you what to do, but it's making you think about what you should do, right? Because we're all different and we're all at different
Mhm.
stages. So what works for me is not going to work for the next MSP down the road, right? That's, something I love to do is chat with other MSPs. We have a huge group of Alberta MSPs that talk all the time, and we're constantly, sharing that knowledge. And how do we how do we get you to the next level? We're on the larger side of MSPs in our group, which is great because we have that knowledge that we love to share. But when we're looking for that, we work with a coach to try and answer some of those. And it's not that we're looking for someone to give us answers. It's, what are those questions? And everybody's answers are so different, right?
Yeah. How many employees do you have, Carrie?
We have 22 total.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Canadian MSPs are just smaller.
And nicer? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, let's not go
Depends
down
on the
that road.
day.
We'll start talking about like syrup. Can you send some all dress chips down to the US? We can't get those here.
Really? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Ketchup chips? We got those too.
Oh
Ketchup
man.
chips? Oh, I'm
Yeah.
so in.
I
I
feel like I'm gonna have to pack my bag for our next meeting, and
yes, yes.
Can
Yeah,
IT
there's
last year we gave everybody syrup, maple syrup.
oh
Talk to Berkeley about that one. Yeah.
we're actually on like a Canadian kick on the show here because we had Desiree Thomas that was
Mhm.
on the last episode, and then we had Colin Knox on
Yeah.
right before that. So yeah. So
Yeah, they're a couple
we like
hours
our
away from
Canadian
me. Yeah.
friends. Oh,
It's great. We need some love up here.
um, so what kind of I'm asking from a point of ignorance because I admit I have not read the community guidebook yet. Is
Mm.
this a operational guide, or is it more of a technical guide, or is it both? Like, is it what your architecture should be, or is it
No, it'd
more
be
how to
more on
run
the
your business?
operational and how to run your business for sure. At the end, it kind of gets into talking about like the vendors and vetting process, right? Which I know the councils have a whole done a lot of work around that too, right?
Yep.
On how to select them and what to look for, right? So grabbing,
Mhm.
resources not just from the people who were part of this project, but also from, the councils and our peers there, and trying to link some of that work together so that councils and communities are putting out, very similar things that kind of link together. And that's where, we're fortunate to have Vicky as our liaison, right, between the two groups, and sharing what both are doing back and forth, because there's so many brilliant people in the room and so many ideas to share. So how do we make sure that we're all moving forward? It's like rowing, sitting in a canoe, and one person's rowing backwards and one's rowing forward. You're not going to go anywhere, right? How do we make sure that we're going in the same direction?
Also,
I'm
I
still
just downloaded it. I'm very happy to see it's not gated. That's awesome.
yeah. I keep going back to the superpower question, and I just have to ask Carrie, what is your superpower?
I love the question. I love asking other people because I'm so curious. I think that part of my superpower is being curious, is asking, wanting to get to know people and what makes them tick and how can we work together. I love to be that connector, and just really putting people in and asking those questions, and how do we be better together? From the community side of things, it's definitely a passion, and um, I just want to can we all just get along in a room and just move forward and, be better
Yeah.
together?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it definitely you can tell that you love what you do and giving back to the community. So Matt, I've got to ask you, what's your superpower?
My
Besides
superpower? You mean
besides
aside from being able to
like
run fast? I guess
well,
that
yeah,
might be it.
I was just gonna say that, yeah. Besides being a fast
Um,
runner.
I think if you want to take one for the industry, it's that for someone deeply technical, I'm pretty outgoing and social, and there's not a lot of that around the channel, or like the tech industry at all, right? In its
Mhm.
entirety, channel or not. So, being someone who can speak to both engineers down to the ones and zero levels, and also to business people is I guess I'll take that as my superpower.
I think that's a superpower.
That is a superpower. So if you're listening in, make sure that you are writing down what your superpower is and then put it somewhere so that way you can remind yourself of what you're really good at and helping
So
to
we
bring
got to
it
hear
to the
yours now,
fore.
Vicky. You just asked both of us.
Oh, okay. All right. I am a connector. I've always been a networker. I've always been a social butterfly. I did not know that the channel existed before I landed at a ChannelCon event in 2017. I was working for a channel company when I started at ConnectWise in 2015. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really know about the channel until I got out there and I was like, oh my gosh, people do this for a living. This is exactly where I need to be. These are my people.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's finding people that have synergies and being able to connect them together. That's something that I've always really enjoyed. So it's nice to be able to do it
Mhm.
for a living.
The channel's definitely a special place, right? It's definitely a united, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, can I ask, Carrie, based on the guidebook that you put out, um, what questions are you getting from the community about how this is either help them or, some areas that they're really kind of the MSPs are struggling with that some of this guidebook content can help them with?
Yeah, I think where it all kind of came from was just looking to scale and looking to grow the MSP, right? At different stages. We used to really focus in on, where you were at and put you in a box, and this is what you're going to do and this is how you're going to grow. But I think that what the guidebook does is it creates it so that there is no real boundary between the different stages of where you are with your MSP, right? It can be adapted to any of those spots. So you just have to think about those questions a little bit differently, right? If you're, a sub 1 million, or if you're a past 5 million kind of thing, right? Or at the end of the day, we all have challenges. So
Mhm.
how do we think about those? What questions do we ask? And it's a guide, it's a framework, but it's not this is what you need to do.
What questions do you ask? Right. So let's say I teleported back in time when I was like the, I don't know, fourth or fifth employee at this organization. What kind of questions do you ask me to figure out where I am, or what's where to go from there next as a business? Like I see QBRs mentioned a lot in the
Mhm.
guidebook. Is that one of the first things you would start with?
I think it's a great place to go because when you're looking at your pain points, right? Sometimes you can grab that data from your tickets, but sometimes you need to talk to the people and really understand, right? What does that pain point actually look like and how is it affecting your business? Is it a matter of we just need to tweak things, or is it a matter of like
Mm,
we need to actually transform what you're doing, right? Is that something that we're looking at? Okay, we need to move you off of your on-prem server and into the cloud. And that's going to like make life so much easier, right? Or, you take the security side of things, depending on where you're at with your business and where your clients are at, right? Some of them are startups and some of them are well established. And you've got like those trades or those machine shops that are so stuck in their way and they're like, what do you mean I have to use MFA? I can't do that. I have to like remember a password. I can't just hit okay. Like, so it's a lot of it is user education too, right? Is
yeah.
is a lot of the questions that you're going to ask to determine. But as far as like growing your business or your MSP and how you got to, I think, take that step back and say, where am I now and where do I want to be? And why do I want to be
Mm,
there? Right.
that's a great question. Like, what's your goal?
Yeah, and one thing that we have not always done well, and that's why we're working with coaches now, is we'll create these great lofty goals or what we think are lofty goals. And we're like, yeah, in 5 years, we're going to be here. Well, it's the end of year one and we hit that. Maybe they're not quite lofty enough, or, we're not being, strategic or we're focusing too much on that. So I think, being deliberate in what we're looking for or what we're asking and really doing that, not just self-reflection, but reflection on the business as a whole as to where I want to be.
Is there such a thing as too lofty of a goal? If I'm at, if I'm just starting out and I have 1,000 endpoints and I say my goal is to have 100,000 endpoints in the next 5 years, is that so abstract that I can't even really take meaningful steps there?
I think that's that moment of, okay, well, what is your capacity? Right? You got to ask a few more questions. Maybe it's not a question of is it too lofty of as a goal, but what is my time frame and what do I need to do? How fast am I going to scale? And do I have the money to do that? Because at the end of
Hmm.
the day, it all right. You need those funds, but you need those people. You can't take that on yourself. So how big is your organization? Maybe it's totally achievable, but what are those micro goals in between? Maybe right.
Mm, yeah,
So
something that's
because
actually achievable and a reasonable
yeah,
time period that you can
when you
work
look at that
towards.
huge goal, it can be overwhelming, which can be a stopping factor where, some people freeze. I know if my goal is too lofty, I'm going to like, whoa, this is too much. I don't even know where to start. I can't even look. How do I break that down? So I think some of it comes down to who you are and how you function too.
One of
Okay,
the
so it's not too ambitious. It's just that you should have some steps in between that you can
Mhm.
actually achieve, just to guide what your steps
Well,
should be.
and if
yeah.
your goal's so big, you're never going to feel like you're getting there. How do you
Yeah,
measure, right? How do you measure
discouraging.
those little pieces, right? Yeah, you need successes in between. If there's no successes, where's the excitement? It's a
Mhm.
grind. And if it's a grind, you're gonna burn out way faster. Let's find that excitement and keep the people who wanna be there there.
Keep them happy. Recognize
Yeah,
them for what they do.
right?
One of the things that Colin Knox brought up when we were interviewing him, Carrie, was that being a an owner or somebody who is helping to take the business and find other market opportunities as technology progresses and change and the dynamics change for and the needs change for your customers. Is that something? How does your organization kind of think about that strategically? Like, you know what your bread and butter is, what you're really good at, and what can bring in money. But then, how are you balancing that with maybe other new ideas of how you can tap into existing markets?
Yeah, some of that comes down to, again, just being curious, right? And, always wanting to learn. If we're not learning, we're not growing. And if we're not growing, then we're stagnant. And what's the point? You're gonna lose that excitement really quickly, right? So I think there's room for always to be learning, seeing what else is out there because like I said, the only thing consistent in IT is change. So
Mhm.
what's next? And carving out your team. And I think some of that goes to investing within your organization, within your people. So seeing these new things come down and who's learning this and who's, going to bring some of those ideas back. And that's where going to the different events in the channel are fabulous, because it allows you to see what's out there and what other options are there. How are people doing it? So it's not even necessarily just talking to, the sponsors and the vendors about the tools and the how to solve problems that way, but it's talking to other MSPs, really having those conversations about some of your pain points, or what's exciting, what have you learned, and how do we share that? How are you using this? What are you doing that for, right? If we think about the world of AI, so many people out there are like, oh, well, it's chat GPT and copilot, it just rewrites things. But there's so much more, right? So it goes to really just being curious and sharing that excitement, and not being afraid of things that are new. I think I used to really
Mhm.
be afraid of a lot of the new things, right? I'm not, I work in IT, but I hate change. Right? I know, totally contradicts itself. But, embracing it and seeing where it can take you, and just being excited instead of scared.
So is your company leaning into AI right now?
We're going down that road, um it's a delicate balance, right? We have a lot of trades, a lot of construction and that kind of stuff within our portfolio who definitely don't embrace that area of things, but we need to use it internally before we can really pitch it solidly externally, because we need to know what we're talking about. So we're leaning into it internally. We have, a project automation team that, takes care of a lot of that stuff to really create those efficiencies in that process, so that we can say, this is how we use these things to not replace people, but enhance people, right?
Are
To
you seeing
just
clients ask about
elevate.
it?
They're starting to. Yeah, they're definitely starting to, and that's where, we need to learn more about, the security side of things, right? When you look at
Mhm.
things like opening up a Copilot across your organization, well, who can search for something and pull up an HR document that they shouldn't be able to, right? So,
Yeah.
um, like that side, making sure that all of their postures are good. So that's where there's, tools out there in the market that are great to really have in your stack to run some of those reports and make sure that everything is locked the way it's supposed to be locked, because the last thing you need is a security issue, right?
How do you talk about that with client? I know we're diving into AI a little more, but I've had this come up, or I've had people ask me about this. When you have that internal or discussion with clients about, one of the first things we have to do is see if there was any if there's been privilege and access creep before we let Copilot loose on it.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes the response from a client is something like, "Well, what do you mean? Aren't you guys doing that already?" Like, how do you have that discussion with the client when that comes up?
Yeah, I think a lot of it just kind of comes back to that transparent conversation. Yes, we absolutely take care of that, but just like you need your financials audited and reviewed, your security also has to be reviewed, right?
That's a great analogy.
When you have staff from your client organizations, making those, well, so and so needs permissions to this folder and this folder, and then you start with that explicit rather than that group, or it could be inherited from a previous IT provider. There's always a constant review that has to happen, because and nothing's perfect.
Right.
So I think
Yeah,
it's
there'll always be some
you know
configuration drift. Got it.
mhm, honing in on that review is constant. It always has to happen.
So I do you mind if we dive into another subject that I'm keen to learn a little bit more
No,
about,
please do
Carrie.
before we go off the
I
rails and on AI.
Okay, all right. So I want to understand, what was the catalyst for CanadaCon, which is the organization that you helped to stand up in
Mhm.
Canada. And I know that it's obviously the Americans on the other side of the border. We're allowed to come over and hang out and sponsor, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, this is where I get really excited. So, like, like I said earlier, I love the concept of community. My business partner and I, Daniel, we've been very fortunate to be able to go to many events, come down to the States, travel, because we have a larger team. There's always somebody here who can make sure that our day to day is continuing on, right? But there's so many MSPs in Canada that don't get that opportunity or don't take that opportunity because they're so busy working in the business that they don't have that time to work on it. So there's really very few events in Canada, and even less specifically in Western Canada where we're located. So, what we wanted to do was find a way to bring out some thought leaders, to bring out some sponsors and vendors to um, give Canadian MSPs a space to go to learn, to share, to meet other people, and create some of that community and foster um, each other's knowledge, right? To grow further and bring them together, but not quite so far away from home where it can be cost prohibitive. It can be hard to get away from their businesses. And so it's a shorter time frame. We've had super success so far. Year one was great. Year two was almost 100% increase on
Wow.
the MSP side from year two, and we're already above for registration for year three. We're already ahead of where we were um, 2 months out from the event last year. So it's going to grow exponentially again this year, which is great. It allows us to bring in more sponsors, to bring in more information, to bring in more thought leaders. So it's not just all sponsorship driven, right?
Mm-hmm.
We really want to understand what not just our MSP, because let's face it, I'm bringing all of my competitors into the same space, right? But that's
Yeah.
okay because there's a lot of work to go around and there's also a lot of knowledge to share. And I feel richer being able to share that knowledge with somebody else. And I learned so much from other people in this space. So one of the catalysts was being able to bring those people together so that we can all have that feeling and have that, you know, conversation and be able to grow our MSPs. It's hard to want to take your MSP to that next level when everybody else is still below. So you got to bring them up with you. And that's what we're trying to do.
Any particular or specific themes that you're looking to cover during this event, or is it kind of general and everything?
Yeah, it's pretty general yet at this point. I will say this year we are bringing in many more thought leaders that are not sponsors so that um, we can focus on that education.
Yeah.
Right, the sponsors are great. We love each and every one of them because they bring so much knowledge. Their tools are what provide those solutions to help make our businesses run more efficiently and the like of that. But those thought leaders coming in to just they just want to talk, they just want to share their knowledge and just educate each of us, right? So we always are asking for feedback or ideas from other MSPs out there, like what are your pain points, just like we would do in the MSP world and talk to our customers. What are those things that really keep you up at night? What are those things that you would love to know more but you don't know where to get that information? So we had last year we had a speaker talking about business law, right? And how
Mhm.
that goes. We've had insurance in there speaking about cybersecurity insurance, but we've also had a speaker come in and talk about mental health and burnout and how do you deal with that overwhelm. Those topics that you don't hear a lot about, and that room was packed. It was amazing, right? So just trying to bring in more of that kind of stuff to um, cater to what the MSPs are looking for.
So the other beautiful thing about this conference, which I have not been to yet, but I do have FOMO because it is set in the mountains. I don't know what the mountain range is, Carrie. I know you know
It's
it,
in
but
the Rocky Mountains, yeah.
okay, Rocky Mountains. All right, obviously I'm having a blonde a blonde moment. But yeah, it's set in the Rocky Mountains, but it's just absolutely breathtaking. Like
Mhm.
you are set up in a very scenic location, learning really great content. So if you're looking for maybe a little getaway, and for some great
Absolutely.
education, check it out. When is the CanadaCon 2025?
So CanIT is going to be September 7th to 9th, 2025, located in Kelowna, BC. For year two, we will be, or for year three, oh my gosh, and we'll be rotating it, year from year. But the venue was so lovely to work at, and it was just picturesque. So we are going to have one more year in that location and just really enjoy that, the wine that's around and the lake that's right in front of
Oh,
us.
there's
And
wine too.
oh, it's wine country. Yes, you gotta be there. Like, it's amazing. We had an event at an exclusive winery this last year where we brought 100 of our, guests out and had a wine tasting and um, live music and just absolutely stunning right on the lake.
Oh,
Vicky, you're gonna go and forget to go to the conference, just hang out in the mountains and
I
do wine tasting
know.
the whole time.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I'm already
Uh,
just seeing myself, out there hanging out. Anyways, well, maybe I'll see you, Carrie. That sounds awesome.
I think we only have a few minutes left, so there's something I want to ask that'll I think go into a couple other areas. So we usually talk about this question around habits, but we're talking about business operations, and you've worked with I think a number of MSPs that are starting out or getting started, and many of our listeners are kind of E-Myth style engineer turned business person MSPs.
mhm.
So how do you take someone and help them get into that mindset of it's really not about the technology, it's about the tools and business around, or it's not about the tools, right? It's about the business operations and processes around that, less so than the tech. And I think you alluded to that before when you said something like, it's really not about the tools, but how do you take someone who's like deep technical engineering person and convince them that that's maybe not least important, but certainly not as important as you think. Like how do you coach someone into that?
I think it comes down to asking questions and being curious. So, what are those pain points and how do we get there, right? So, yes, we can go and we can configure that firewall, we can set up those backups, we can make sure that your cybersecurity posture is great using these tools. But at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? So, a lot of us come from that deep technical background and
Mm.
became business owners and ruined a hobby, however you want to look at it, right? But like it's it at some point you do have to take that step back, and it can be scary when you're coming from that deep technical side, right? Because you're like, well, I can just do it all. I just need to do it. But in order to scale and grow, you can't do it alone. So at some point you have to actually take that step back, ask those questions of where do I want to go again? I think it goes back to, those goals that we were talking about. And if you want to grow, you can't you it's going to be more difficult to do alone because you're going to be working in the business as opposed to on that business. So setting those goals, looking at what they are, but making sure, you asked earlier, Matt, about is a goal too lofty? And for somebody just starting out, yeah, a goal can be too lofty, I think.
Mhm.
So what are those even those micro goals that you have to say that I'm moving forward? And what does it look like to, bring somebody on who can do some of the technical so I can focus on the business? Or how do I divide my time, right? If you're going to take this on alone, that's cool. All the power to you. You're not going to sleep, but it's,
Right.
but yeah, how do you divide your time? How do you balance it? Because working on your business is just as important as working in your business if you want to scale.
Love it. We should get that on a poster of some sort.
Hmm. Yeah.
So Vicky, are there any other questions you want to ask before we get to what we'll call the last question, which I will change slightly for this episode, but I don't want to just end without giving you a chance to ask anything else.
Oh, well, thank you. Ever the hospitable co-host. I appreciate that, Matt. I can't really think of anything right now. No, but I am curious to hear what Carrie's answer is going to be for our last question, for
Ooh,
sure.
Okay, so our last question, the way we end every episode is that we ask, what's one habit that you should either start doing, establish, or that you should stop doing and try and rid yourself of? And I think in this case, we'll frame it as what's a habit that you should start or stop doing to improve your business operations side, right? Like, forget about the technical part for a second. I know that's hard for all of us because we're engineers,
mhm.
but um, if you're running a business, you're running an MSP, what's one thing that you can reasonable, right? One thing that you can really put into practice and start or stop to make your business better.
My brain immediately went to the personal side of it, I think, and I'll go back to the business side in a second. But I think it's some of those positive affirmations. We all face imposter syndrome, or a lot of us faced imposter syndrome, right? And
Hmm.
just and maybe this can tie into the business too, right? If you're just starting out or wherever you are in that, I think we all face it. But taking that step back and looking at where you've been and where you are and how you got there, and remembering that you did that, right? We're all super. So I think that habit that you can start doing is reminding yourself to take that step back and look at what you've done to get to where you are.
Mm,
I do love a
I
good
like that one.
affirmation statement. I just started this. I just started this journal that is called the Fearless Woman Leadership Journal.
Ooh,
Yeah, and
Mm,
it's on Amazon. But the twins, the Tech Twins podcast,
mhm,
they're the ones that created this guide. And it's again, I mean, not really a guide; it's a journal. And so the first thing that you do this like week by week, and and it says, what is my daily I am statement, which is part of that affirmation that you're building for
mhm,
yourself. So yeah, it's definitely
yeah,
key because it's like if you don't have space for it or give it space, I guess maybe that's the best way to
mhm.
say it, then how are you ever going to believe it?
Yeah, it's really easy to fall into the negative mindset too, I think, especially as we're busy as, whatever position we hold within an organization, we're busy. And you get so caught up in that day to day. So I think taking that step back and reflecting, being curious, and resetting yourself to move forward is important.
Mm-hmm.
and
Well
Mickey, that's an
said.
I am statement, not instant message, which is where I jumped to first when I heard that.
No, listen, I think this is Matt. I'll get you this for Christmas, and we'll just cross out, fearless. Like we'll put man, fierce man
Person, right?
journal.
Human.
Yeah, human. Yeah, because yeah, I mean, I'm not very good at like being mindful of writing things down,
Mhm.
but however you do it, it definitely is a good. It is a good theme, and I feel like this has come up in other episodes. So I think you're onto something, Carrie.
I think so
Well,
too.
thanks for joining us, by the way, Carrie. We appreciate having you on IT Nation Wise Up. And for everybody listening in, we appreciate you always. Make sure, if you haven't done it yet, that you're subscribing to this podcast so you can listen to future episodes. And until next time, remember that every day is a chance to learn something new.